let's move on. We got a question that came in, and I thought it was a really good one that really kind of hits the current vibe of kind of what's going on here in Hawaii. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion between the four of us. And this came from Kurrick, and Kurrick says, I talked to a friend who lived on the island of Maui for several months while helping to build a house for a client. I asked him if he would have liked to live there permanently, and he said it was too touristy. New groups of tourists arrived every day. It was kind of like being at a state fair. He also said that the social stratification was uncomfortable. The locals who served the tourists lived on the cheaper side of the island where the real culture was, and the prices were lower and food was locally produced and caught like fish. Is there social stratification between the tourists and locals, and do the locals resent this? So I thought that Kara's question was a pretty good one. And what I wanted to do between the four of us is to kind of share, kind of give everyone a feel for kind of what's going on, because we definitely feel this thing, right? There's like stories going on, about those, stupid people on Instagram that are, blocking roads and, making Hana unsafe. We have the idiot who was, touching the monk seal. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what stupid pranks are going on the Big Island, but there's crowds. There's all this kind of change going on. And I think, we all came off of COVID where for a moment there, the place was empty, right? Beaches were empty. There was no one anywhere. And we all everyone had a chance to kind of feel what it's like to not have any visitors on kind of quote, have it all to ourselves. And now that the crowds are coming back, and arguably they're worse now, either they're worse because there's more people or because there's less resources available. So it feels more crowded. I'm not too sure. But I want to kind of have a sense of, where do you think this is going? What's the vibe? What's the vibe on your island, and where do you think this is going? Let's start. Let's go clockwise. Dylan and Scott, and then Heidi. Go, Dylan.
Hopefully I don't have the most controversial stuff to say, but
hey man, you are who you are. You are who you are. You speak the truth, and that's that.
Yeah, I guess I'll start with, right. I mean, again, we're not trying not to get too political here, but we decide our own fate, right? The residents here decide our own fate, and for decades we've decided that we're not going to do anything different than support a tourism economy. And so, if there's resentment, I'm sure there's some of it out there. There's a very diverse community. Some of that is self-inflicted, and we hear these complaints from people and politicians year after year about the way things are. We could change it. All you got to do is change government policy. We have lots of stuff here in Hawaii that would be transformational in terms of our economy. We have astronomy, we have volcanology, we have amazing agricultural resources, ocean resources for marine sciences. I mean, you name it. You can do so many things here. We can be a place where people from all over the Pacific can come and meet and hold conferences and things like that. But instead of pushing our economy in a different direction, we continue to build hotels and have a tourism-based economy. So it is what it is. I'm not resentful of it. I was born and raised here. My family's been here for generations. I've done my part to try and change that in the past, and wasn't successful. So it is what it is. I don't feel like we're oppressed or anything like that. I mean, I made a decision to pursue a career in something that would allow me to live here comfortably and support my family. And we all have the choice to do that. We live, this is still America. We have more opportunity than anywhere else in the world. And I have tons of friends, local friends, that have created a life for themselves that is very comfortable and successful, and some that moved away and never came back, right? So I don't feel like if you have the attitude like the tourists are the problem, you got to look in the mirror and you got to make some decisions on what your destiny is going to be, because you have some determination over that. I don't think we're a victim of too many tourists.
Very well said. That's a great sentiment, and I think it's a good piece of input into the conversation. Scott, what's the vibe? What's the vibe that you're catching on Oahu, that you're sensing? Where do you think this is going, and how do you see it?
Yeah, where it's going is a great question, because I'm not really sure. I mean, what I feel like we're experiencing right now is a little bit of lack of the resources from lack of the jobs, lack of the restaurants being able to fully open back up with the support staff. And then two, more people coming here. We went through a time period where we all reevaluated how we want to live our lives, and people are able to work more remotely now. So I think we're seeing that push and that move. And we as humans don't like change. Our body temperature tries to stay the same. Otherwise, if we have fluctuations, we get out of whack. And I think what we're seeing is we went through this calm period, this really quiet period, and now we've come back roaring back more so than prior, and our resources are a little limited right now. So we can't really handle the full capacity of what's come down the pipe. And then it gets compounded by a few people, or a fair amount of people, handful of people that don't respect the place and the culture and how you need to behave yourself when you're in somebody else's home or in another environment. Anytime I travel, especially when I travel abroad, I try to learn ahead of time about the cultural aspects so I can be respectful, so that I don't become that nasty American and things. So I feel like it's a little combination of all that. You got a few bad apples that post stuff on Instagram. It gets highlighted in the news, and it shapes people's thoughts and opinions a little bit. And we're all feeling the stress when we go to restaurants or we go out, and there's a lot more people, and you got to make reservations to get into restaurants multiple days in advance. It puts us in an uncomfortable position. But by no means do I want to limit the tourism. I think it's more, hey, if you come here and you're respectful, I'm more than welcoming. I'm not one to say, hey, you can't come here. Somebody let me come here 22 years ago. I'm in no place to turn around and tell someone they can't come here.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. I love this. This varied input. Heidi, before we move on to Heidi, I just want to tell everybody, emphasize, hey, if you got some questions or comments, put them in the chat now, because I'm going to kind of queue it up and try to get to your questions, because right after Heidi's done and we're finished with this segment, we're going to get some Q&A done and things of that nature. So please pop your questions and comments and things you'd like us to talk about in the comments section. Heidi, Maui's been getting a lot of press, I think more outsized. A lot of the stories seems to be outsized press. The mayor asking the airlines to limit the flights. There was a bunch of protests. There were, kind of a walk-on protests on beaches. Maui seems to be catching a lot of the press. What's the vibe on Maui? How are things feeling, and where do you think this is going to go, Heidi?
Well, it's just interesting because back in 2019, we had a lot of visitors here then too, and it's just the contrast after having no visitors in 2020 and then returning back to being a very busy time. I just wanted to comment more on the general feeling of it. I think it was said it feels like a state fair. I think that living in a touristy area is not for everybody. And there are certainly areas on Maui, if you go to Whalers Village in Kaanapali or Front Street, yes, there's going to be tourists everywhere. Those are tourist areas. That's not like that on the entire island. And when somebody's looking for a place to live, if they're going to be living in a resort where there's vacation rentals all around them, they're going to be in a touristy area. If they don't want to live in an area like that, there's many places on the island where you could live that actually don't allow vacation rentals and are residential only or are out in the country. So I would say, the whole place isn't like a state fair.
Yeah, it's definitely not like a whole place like a state fair. I think you're right. I think one of the things that I do like about the way that, at least for speaking for Oahu for sure, and I think to a degree Maui, is that, Waikiki is kind of where all the tourists are kind of crammed together, right? So it's like one place. We got vacation rentals here and there, but it's like it's one place, and that could feel like certainly a Waikiki Kalakaua Avenue at night absolutely feels like a state fair. But that's just that one place where it's designed for that. And I think to a similar Maui Kaanapali area is somewhat like a tourism area, Lahaina, etc. maybe not quite as concentrated as Waikiki, but yeah, the entire place is not like a state fair. I wanted to speak a little bit about the social stratification part, and if there's any kind of comments you guys want to kind of jump in on. One of the questions that Carrick asked about was, is there social stratification? I don't think there is any in Hawaii. That is one of the so far, a lot of the resentment that I'm catching on the sort of the national news has not apparently come to Hawaii, and hopefully it will not. Hawaii is not a socially stratified place. Not that I can sense. Socially stratified meaning there is no sense of us versus them. There is no sort of resentment against those who have wealth versus those who do not, at least not yet. And I pray it never comes here. Hawaii is a very, very integrated place. What I love about, and I was born in Chicago. I left when I was only 21 years old, but I did live there enough to understand, big cities on the mainland, and I'm going to pick Chicago as one of them. A lot of quote diversity, a lot of diversity. People from all over the world are living in Chicago, but they're living in little pockets. There's like Little Italy, there's China, there's there's the Greek area, there's the so-and-so area. All these little pockets are, in and of themselves, I don't want to say isolated, but certainly they're somewhat segregated. The Polish live in this certain district, and there's all these kind of districts where all the people kind of live together. That's not the case in Hawaii. There's some general terms, but for the most part, people are very integrated. Where I live on my block, I've got it all. We got Polynesians, Chinese, Japanese, Haole, you name it, it's on my block. And I think that is like the way most of Hawaii is. It's an integrated society. I think Hawaii is the place. It's a model for the city of the future, where everyone is integrated, everyone lives well together, everyone kind of understands each other. And I see stratification. It's become a topic on the U.S. mainland. I hope that never comes to our shores, although Hawaii kind of lags the U.S. by 4 or 5 years, so I am afraid of that. I don't know if anybody wants to chime in. I don't want to call any names. You want to just chime in? Go for it, Dylan.
I got a couple more points to make. So yeah, on the social stratification, comment or like segregation or whatever you want to think about it, it's important to kind of define the word local, right? Like people like throw that word out there, like, what does that mean? It can mean different things to different people, but sometimes people view it as skin color, right? If you're brown, you're like a local person. There's plenty of brown people here that just got here, right? So they're not necessarily local. And a lot of those people are immigrants, and that's what built Hawaii. Is there are places on the island that, yes, are lower cost of living places, and a lot of brown people live there and then have to drive to service industry jobs, maybe at the resorts and stuff. But they're not seeing their life as stratification. They're here, living the American dream. I mean, making money, sending money back home to wherever they came from, maybe buying property and, really advancing their lot in life. And so it may seem to somebody from a different, social status that they're not as well off as they are. But in their perspective, I know plenty of immigrant families who are super stoked to be here and living in a poor part of the, a cheaper part of the island, and then driving far to serve tourists. That's a great life for them. So that's the first thing, is kind of don't assume what a local is. And then on the flip side of that, you have, and this is the public service announcement, is the worst type of person here is the person that has last haole off the boat syndrome. And what that means is that you got here 2 or 3 years ago, bought your house, and now you bitch every day online about more people come in and how bad it is, right? And that's the worst attitude to have. We let you in, you came here, you got your piece, and now you don't want anybody else to come. And a lot of times, the people who are online and are the loudest about this are those people, right? It's not a truly local person that's from here. It's these people that maybe came a couple of years ago and now have this attitude like they know what's best and they're gonna cut everybody off. So don't have last haole off the boat syndrome, because that's the worst.
I love that. We have to make that a bunch. Last haole off the boat syndrome. There's a fantastic episode on South Park that's about, I don't know if you recall that, but there's a great South Park episode about last haole, a bunch of haoles that are living on Kauai, and they call themselves Hawaiians. It's really hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious, and it typifies that exact thing that you had talked about. Anybody else want to chime in on this topic and throw anything else in? Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I would say Oahu is much more of a melting pot, in the sense that we're all just neighborhood to neighborhood, and urban core, Honolulu, Kaka'ako, Waikiki, we're all just mixed in and blended together, and we cross paths with everybody, even the tourists, all the time. I would say the outer islands to me are a little more where you could, feel like, oh, it's a state fair, in the sense that a resort is a man-made product. You put a bunch of palm trees up, you put a hotel there. Yeah, it's designed specifically for transient accommodations and getting a bunch of people in there for a week or, so, and getting them out and getting a new group in. So yeah, your resort community is going to be vastly different feeling than, Honaka'a, where that's been people's homes for 50, 60, 70 years, and they go and work at the resort. So it's a different vibe, but by no means is it. I feel like that comment that was made or that statement seems drastically overblown on what it's like here in Hawaii.
I think it may typify. I mean, we can only guess, right? Because Carrick is not here to give us some feedback. But to me, I'm just going to guess that Carrick was working or operating in a tourist area, which the tourist area feels like a state fair, but that's not the whole island. I was going to say go take the drive to Hana if you want to see what it doesn't feel like, but that might not be a really good example right now at this point. The road to Hana may feel like a state fair, or maybe a zoo. I'm not too sure. Anyway. Heidi, is there anything you want to add to this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I really love about living in Hawaii is it's not a materialistic place. And I think your success when you come here as a new resident, I mean, it really depends on your attitude and just willing to meet people and form those social networks. And it takes some time. I mean, whenever you move to a new place, but it's really awesome when somebody calls you and they just caught a big ahi and they want to give you some fish or get some fresh mangoes. I mean, it's mango season right now. I've had the most amazing mangoes ever recently. So, I mean, that's really cool. And I do love that about living on Maui. I mean, there's always going to be challenges anywhere you live. But anyway, I'm really grateful to live here.
Yeah, ditto here on the. I will challenge you on the mangoes, though. I have the best tasting mangoes on the planet. I have never had a better tasting. I got these yellow Perry mangoes. Nobody's mangoes beat mine. But that'll be, actually, Heidi, it's kind of really funny you mentioned that, because very, very true. People are sharing. It's this great. I'm sure it has roots back to old Polynesia about neighbors sharing food, or maybe it's just a universal human thing. I'm not too sure. But for example, my neighbor, I have a Korean neighbor, and she came in yesterday and knocked on my door and gave me a plate of food. Just here. Here you go, plate of food. We have other neighbors who have avocados that bring us avocados. When we have excess mangoes, we take them to our neighbors. Didn't have excess this year, but it's certainly great. Yeah, great stuff. Great conversation, gang.